So, Kalispera, Kalo Avoyevma, and Evkaristo Smaragda. So I will share my screen if at any time there is something that I am saying that you might not understand. Please do not hesitate to stop me. Just unmute and say stop, or some other signal. If there is, if I'm going too quickly with my speech, please also indicate that. I will do my best to be clear and enunciate. And I can't imagine listening and trying to understand a session in Greek. So I have the utmost respect that you were willing to do this in a language other than perhaps your native one. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak in my native tongue. So I'm going to share the screen with you, and sharing sound is good. And Smaragda, can you see this okay?
Yes, everything is perfect.
Ah, wonderful. Very rarely does the word perfection enter my vocabulary. Today, I thought we'd take a look at the ethics of community engagement at large, but specifically community music engagement. Professor Chrysostomu mentioned that you have been working and discussing formal and informal music making. And I'd like for us to first, before we get into that, I'd like to share some pictures with you of outside of my office window. Greetings to you from the Oberlin College and Conservatory of Music. These are some of the spring scenes. And of course, I couldn't allow the opportunity to pass without sharing from my house some of our tulips and, yes, Greek oregano that we looked forward to taking stock of this summer. Now, back to our session overview. We'll take a look at how you define community and community music engagement, what your core values might be, what's the purpose, what's your intent, and then looking very specifically at community engagement ethics. This is not just specific to community music engagement, but community engagement at large. We'll look at dispositions and habits of mind, what the roles we play in community music engagement. We'll explore care pedagogy, purported by Nell Noddings. We'll think about community-based learning as a specific pedagogy. And then that's all to frame my work with the Oberlin Music at Grafton, the OMAG Choir, which is an all-male prison choir in a state penitentiary, a jail, a prison, about 9 miles from where I live in Ohio. So that's kind of the overview. But if at any time you would like us to go in a different direction, I'm totally fine with that as well. So I want this to be free and open and an informal discussion. So let's go. So before we start, I'd like for us to do a pre-flexion exercise. I use a lot of pre-flexions in my class areas to kind of get the juices flowing. So if you could just take out a writing utensil, a pen, a pencil, or maybe nothing at all, and just think about who are your musical communities. One of the things that I realize is that as a music educator who taught kindergarten through 8th grade general music and choral music, is that I've always been doing community music. I've just defined community very differently. So whether it's a classroom as your community, whether it is a garage band jam session, a jazz jam session that you call your community, think about who your community is or who you might want to engage musically if you're planning on doing community music engagement in your community. What musical experiences do you share? And here to me is the primary issue. What are your core values for engaging in your musical community? In other words, why bother? Why do you do this? Why is it important to you to engage in whatever community that you've selected? So take about 30 seconds just to ponder, and we'll come back and I'll ask you to share some of your ideas with me. Tomorrow, I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with you and your students after this.
Thank you. That would be great.
First of all, just so I get to know you a little better, what are some of the communities with whom you are working presently, or maybe that you're considering working in the future? You can just unmute and let me know, or if somebody wants to help me with the chat, you can place it in chat, whatever's best for you. Who are your communities? Anybody want to share? No? You're all shy.
I wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Whomever.
Yeah, briefly, I'm trying to put together a community choir in the college where I'm teaching,
Nice.
which is not a college choir, it's a community choir, and I'm encouraging everybody, no prerequisites, no voice needed, no knowledge, anything. It's not easy because choral music is not very popular in Greece, so it's not part of our tradition. And that's my core value is participation, engagement, and discover what music can do for you. No fear, no judgment. And I have few members, but they're very faithful and they really thrive. The result is not always something to be proud of. I mean, musically, but who cares?
Effie, I think it's a different purpose, right? I mean, we aim to certainly improve our vocal technique and things like that, but that's not the point. It's the point of being together in music and with music, right? And experiencing choral music or instrumental music or composing music or whatever the behavior, musical behavior is, to know ourselves uniquely in that way and to feel ourselves and know ourselves as a human in that way or that manner of expression. So I would join your choir any day.
Yes, colleagues come and they say how much their speaking voice has improved, how much easier
Absolutely.
it is for them to teach without tiring their voices.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes. Thank you for sharing that, Effie. Was there someone else I think I might have cut off? Was there someone else who wanted to share defining community and who their community was, is, will be? No? Okay. That's fine. Um, um, One of the things that I would consider thinking about is whether it's a classroom, what do you want from that classroom community experience? Oftentimes, we get so busy day to day in teaching a class that we might overlook the obvious fact that this is actually a living, breathing, dynamic community. And that every class of students that may come in our music class or elementary school class, it has its own cultural values, its own way of engaging. And so I would encourage you, whether you intend to do community music or maybe you will never do community music, to think about what we'll be talking about and how it might apply to your particular context. So I share with you a quotation that comes from Lee Higgins, 2012, Community Music in Theory and Practice. And he calls community musicians or facilitators of community music experiences as boundary walkers. Now, let's think about what a boundary is. Boundaries can be have a fence around it to keep people or animals in, or keep people out or animals out. Boundaries is defining those edges of where our space is and where other spaces are. So it's at one point it's a protection. At one point it is a definition of a space and place. Lee Higgins says that boundary walkers inhabit margins, borders, limitations, and edges. The parameters point towards the center of a structure, but with a sense of going beyond. Let's unpack that a little bit. Boundary walkers try to find community in those spaces where we may not even think that communities are possible. For people who might be left out of communities, so they're outside the borders, right? We have many vulnerable populations in the United States where they don't fit in socially, right? They're outside of the boundaries. For example, prisoners, people who are incarcerated, they're outside of the typical societal framework quite intentionally for punishment purposes. At least that is the notion in the United States. So a boundary walker, if I wanted to think of myself as a boundary walker, I could consider myself as a person who is trying to facilitate a choir in a space where maybe other people don't want to go, or we think that, prisoners singing, is that possible? And once we find those spaces, those nooks and crannies and niches where we can bring music to, then we have an obligation to extend the boundaries and become more inclusive. Effie just mentioned a terrific example of, you don't need to know how to sing. You might not have ever taken voice lessons. You might not know how to read music, but come, sing, just be. That is an example of boundary walking, going beyond and including the people who might not otherwise be included. So community music engagement, and I would consider any type of community engagement, is really about relationship building. To me, if there's one thing that I have learned, certainly with the various communities, whether that's a school classroom with children community, or with colleagues, or with the International Society of Music Education colleagues, or with prison choirs or my youth choirs that I've conducted over the years, that relationship building is at the core value of perhaps what we do. And it's a fine line between balancing community relationship building and the music making, right? They're dual purposes. It's also about active music making. It's not about talking about music, but experiencing that music firsthand, making and doing music in situ or where the people are. So maybe going into those community areas where other people don't go for lots of valid reasons, but maybe taking a risk or finding a way to gain access into an area and making music where the people are, rather than having the people come to us necessarily. It's about how you speak to people, how you greet them, how you respond to their questions, how you engage with their quirks and idiosyncrasies that are all vital ingredients. Lee Higgins in the chapter, I think, no, it wasn't a chapter, it was a 2020 publication. He says that part of the hospitality of being a community music facilitator is this call, a call to be welcomed into the community, opening up the boundaries. And that it's a confirmation, a yes, you belong to this community. Those relationships take a long time to build. Sometimes they're very difficult to build, but the sticking to it and being committed to the relationship building, I find to be really beneficial, but challenging. Um, in the midst of this community music engagement, then, is also a co-creation of meaning making that is at once individual music meaning making, but collective, collaborative community music making, communal music making. It is not just a music making meaning, it's meaning of music, but of person and their own identity, of social belongingness, and one that is both emotional, affective, but also cognitive with the brain. So it's a marriage of all this. And it's a reciprocal relationship. I call myself a facilitator, a choral facilitator in a community setting. And I'm doing more so, I think, also in school settings, because I don't see myself as just the leader. Yeah, I'm probably the adult in the room or the adult charged to lead per a vision, mine or collectively as the group. But as a facilitator, it means that I'm including myself in the learning process, in the meaning making process, and giving validation to every community member's voice, which can be a challenge, certainly. Let's see if I can move on here. So, giving access to people who might not have music or people who want music, it's an interesting interesting process, an interesting tango, an interesting dance that we can be engaged in. And I've listed some dispositions and habits of mind and behavior that I want us to consider as things that we want to practice and demonstrate as we engage with the community. Now, disposition, a disposition is nothing more than a lens, a perspective that frames everything we do. So, for example, our cultural background, our prior experiences, our values, all of that is wrapped up in what forms how we process things. So, if I bring my whatever disposition, who I am, if I bring that into my prison choir, I'm going to make meaning according to what I know or what I think I know or my prior experiences. And so I'm asking us to think how we can develop these dispositions such that we practice them and they become habit. Habit in the way we think, so habit of mind, and the way that we interact with others, so habit of behavior. So, the first, thinking through the dispositions, the filter through which we process our experience is open-mindedness. This is just a simple willingness to absorb, to take in, to observe, to question, to listen, to be, just to be without any judgment. And I think Effie used that, no judgment. You're just here to sing, not just, you're here to sing. Um, and with openness, I would suggest that comes a quietness that can lead you to see and uncover possibilities that you might not otherwise know actually exist. It's the maybe, or maybe this could work, or maybe that might work, rather than no, this cannot work. Ohi. Is that right? Did I say the right word for no? Ohi. It's a meh rather than ohi perspective. It's also, I would imagine, or suggest that through openness, open-mindedness, one uses one's imagination to think about the possibilities and dream about what the possibilities and just let oneself be free of those boundaries that Lee Higgins was talking about, to imagine what could be possible. Humility. Oftentimes, and I had to check myself with my prison choir on this one, oftentimes we want to do good. We want to give something to someone else. We want to make life better for someone else. And in doing so, we might not consider what others want for their own situation. So developing a sense of humility is, first of all, admitting that you might not know all that you think you know. And that's a hard lesson to learn, I admit. And to admit that you might not know what you think you know about people in their own context and what is best for them. Again, there are plenty of people, we call it often in the United States, the white savior complex, that I, as a white person, am going to go into an impoverished area and bring music and life will be better ever after. Well, it may or may not. What does that community want from me? Maybe it's not music. Maybe it is something else that they may need more. So humility is a willingness to think about, what does the community want? Not just what do I want, but is there a need in the community? It's also, I think, honoring your limitations. When I first started my prison choir, I thought, oh my gosh, what if they want to do rap and hip hop music? I've never done rap and hip hop music. I can't do that. What am I going to do now? Now, if that had been the case, I would have needed to have backed away from the prison choir, because that's not within my skill set. One has to recognize and admit one's limitation, even if one wants to work within a community or find another way to engage in that community through, in my case, hip hop or rap. My group did not want that. Actually, they wanted a classical choir, which surprised me. But I was happy that at least I had that skill set that I could offer. Humility is also involved in terms of thinking of oneself as a facilitator and a learner. I like to call myself the senior learner of the group. Yes, I'm older than many of the men in my choir. Yes, I am more experienced in certain types of music than others. But I consider everybody else a junior learner when we're in choir together. My job is to teach and to facilitate and to lead choir experiences, but I am also learning lots from the people who are in the choir. Then there's this thing, the appreciation of community cultural wealth, and that's a lot to unpack. Oftentimes we look at community, we want to bring access, musical access to a community because they don't have something, or they are impoverished, or they are in poverty, or they might be immigrants, or they might be locked up as in prisoners. Um, if we shifted that and worked from a point of assets, meaning what do they have rather than what they do not have, could we then capitalize? Sounds like an American capitalist, isn't it? Could we then capitalize on the assets and the strengths and the what the community has to offer in our community music making? In the United States, particularly communities of color, we say BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, others, people of color. Oftentimes there's this notion of, oh, other can't do this, or they don't have the music reading skills, or they don't know classical music, or they can't, rather than, wow, here's the musical cultural wealth that they bring to the musical experience. It's a shift in thinking, isn't it? in terms of seeing the assets rather than the deficit. Intellectual curiosity. You wouldn't be here probably if you weren't intellectually curious. That means that you possess the habit of mind of questioning, wondering, learning, seeking information in multiple perspectives. This intellectual curiosity in dealing with a community music setting allows you to ask, what do we need to know? What do I need to know as the facilitator? What do the participants need to know or want to know? Who are the key people to know in terms of recruiting, signing people up for our groups? What are the unwritten rules of the community? What rules do I know? What are the language? What about how we speak to one another gives signals, this written and unwritten code that is ever present? An example of that is at the prison that I work at, well, I volunteer at, but where I go, the administration, the prison administration requires that the people who are incarcerated, the residents, I will call them, that the residents call me Dr. Kerchner. We have an unwritten rule that when we are practicing by ourselves, they will call me Jody, and we will call each other by our first names. As soon as we see an official walking down the hall or into our room, it's back to calling each other doctor or Mr. and Ms. That's an unwritten rule that we developed in terms of communication. There are also other communication signals that the group has. One is crossing the chest with arms. We can't touch one another, even pre-COVID, right? No handshakes, no pats on the back. And I'm kind of I'm a choral person, so I like to give hugs and, touch and all that good stuff. You can't do that in a prison. So we have signals. And so we give each other signals of, I'm with you, I support you, I empathize, I'm giving you a hug. There are signals in terms of when people's hands are closed like this. It's a beware moment. You're getting too close. It's getting too emotional. It's getting too heated. So I know to back away from talking about certain topics. So there are these unwritten rules that intellectual curiosity leads you to uncover and even develop. Intellectual curiosity also is a way of your testing what you see, what you observe from your community, and see if it's generalizable to other community groups similar to yours in other contexts. Is your knowledge and experience the only knowledge on this experience, or are there other perspectives that could inform your community practice? Empathy. Here's a question for you. Literally, I'm really eager to hear from you. How does one demonstrate empathy? How do you know empathy if it walks right in front of you? How do you know if somebody's showing you empathy? Anybody want to take a turn at this? How do you know it when you see it? Empathy. Well, let me read a definition. Maybe this will help. I don't know. This just comes from the dictionary. This is not my definition. The action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously. So, not experiencing it yourself, but being with somebody's experiences and feelings and thoughts. How do you know it when you see it? How do I know when Smaro is being empathetic toward me? How does she know? Maybe she's never seen it. I hope that's not the case. But maybe she's never seen me being empathetic towards her. I hope she has. But how would we know? What does it look like? Anybody have any thoughts? This is tough.
I think it sounds like more than look like.
It's not just a look like, but I would suggest what's inside is going to make itself manifest. It might be a behavior, right? It might be an energetic vibe that you feel, you know? You all are somewhere on the other side of this planet, and I feel vibes. I feel an energy just by looking at you. Now, why is that? It's just interesting to look and reflect on yourself. What do I feel? What do I look like? How do I behave if I'm empathetic? A friend of mine says soft eyes. She calls it soft eyes. So, here are hard eyes, the squinting, soft eyes. Maybe a nod of the head, or maybe a yeah. Maybe it's asking a question. Maybe it's restating something. Maybe it's whatever. But check it out. How do you show your community? How do you show your classroom, your students empathy? That's a really interesting question. Do we show empathy to our students and our colleagues? That's also another good question. And finally, commitment. My prison guys, I don't know what it's going to be like when I go back. Obviously, because of COVID, I haven't been inside the prison now for over a year. I don't know how many people are going to show up. For all I know, they think I've abandoned them. Even though there's a pandemic, I know at some level they understand I couldn't come there. But I do wonder, how many people feel abandoned when we don't show up? How many people, rely on us to provide the social, the personal, the musical engagement that we promise to do when we are a community musician? So this leads us to this whole thing called care pedagogy. And I will say to you very directly that this is a feminist perspective. Lee Higgins talks about this certainly in terms of hospitality. But Nell Noddings is one of my favorite people. I had the opportunity to sit around a campfire with her and drink some scotch. It was a wonderful moment of getting to know her. And she calls this care pedagogy. Now, there are plenty of intellectuals and academics who think, care pedagogy? We don't have any time for care pedagogy. Are you kidding me? But think about it. How could our educational, our musical experience be different if we shifted our perspective into this model and into this mode? Care pedagogy is that acknowledges that people are deeply affected by their involvement with others. No kidding. Not a big revelation there. That care is actually a fulfilling of basic human life, and it's a social and cultural imperative. And here it is: meeting the personal needs, not just of ourselves, but our community. And that means we have to know what the needs are. We need to be intellectually curious to find out what those needs of the community is, whether it's a classroom or a choir or in a community or wherever. If we think about Abraham Maslow and we think about the hierarchy of needs psychologically, we know that, the food, air, water, all those are the very basic needs at the base of the triangle. But as we move up that triangle, there's also love and relationship and belonging to a community. By gathering as a community that is musical, we are in a position of fulfilling people's basic needs, actually, or it's a way of knowing and being. And Nell Noddings talks about that. It's about dialoguing, talking, modeling. What does care practice look like? What how do we practice? And it's not just a unidirectional way. It is your modeling care and pedagogical ways of being that then are internalized by our participants, our community participants. And you are setting the grounds and the expectations for the type of behaviors and ways of engaging that you want to nurture in your community. So it is a reciprocal relationship. I give care, I expect to get care back. We model and practice those relationships. Look, in a prison, care, Not in American prisons. It's all about punishment. And so it's very difficult to get the men into this notion of compassion and empathy, especially when they don't experience that on a day-to-day basis. So there are times in the middle of my choir practice that I'll have to say, okay, stop. Let's try this again. How could we redo this such that literally practicing as though we were practicing a private lesson, practicing habits of mind? I will tell you that, and I'm looking at the time here. I use community engagement, and specifically this pedagogy that's surrounding community engagement. It's called community-based learning. When I have created a course, it's called Arts Behind Bars. And I've created this course, and as a part of the community-based learning, all of my students, yes, I drive a big van, a big bus, and we travel together to the prison once a week. And they sit with the guys, my singers, and they are section leaders. Some of my students have never sung, don't care. I want them to experience it. Some of the students have never been inside of a prison. Okay. Some of the men in the prison haven't sat aside of an outside person or engaged with an outside person for decades. So this is all a brand new experience. And so I thought, what would it be like? Are there models out there where I can, yes, teach core concepts of pedagogy, teaching and learning, best practices, all the good stuff that no doubt you're thinking about. But how could I also teach these skills, these dispositions, so that the students can practice them real life, real time? It's kind of like student teaching, I suppose, where you go off and you practice these things, except my class met twice a week. So once a week, we would be in class, we'd be preparing, we'd be talking theory and all that good stuff. And then we would apply that in the prison choir, the OMAG choir, on the second class of the week. So it's this combination of theory in practice. It's based on what's called Relational Pedagogies by Noel Mollenhauer, Van Manen, and Nell Noddings, where care, empathy, hospitality is at the core. What some of the key features of this pedagogy are this, and I actually practice this, and I'll share this with you as it worked out with the prison. So you, as the teacher, facilitator, whatever role you're taking on, you find a community partner, and together, that's key, together you identify benefits. So when I went to the prison, actually, I had heard through the grapevine, I had heard that the prison was looking for a choir director. They wanted to start a new choir. And as the person was telling me about, do I know anybody who could conduct a choir? She stopped mid-sentence and said, wait a minute, you conduct a choir, you could conduct the prison choir. And I said, no, thank you. I don't conduct prison choirs. I am a classical musician. No, what are you thinking? And as I drove away from that conversation, I thought, oh, so you're about musical access for all. You're about social justice for all. You have worked with students in developing empathy and compassion. Why would you not conduct a prison choir? What's really behind that? And a lot of it was fear of the unknown. I never been inside of a prison. I didn't know what I was getting into. So once I got past that, I thought, okay, they have a need. But what are my needs? What do I want from this choir? And so I listed, here are my needs. And then the prison choir, the prison administration listed, well, here's what we need from you. And so there was this negotiation. But key, it was mutually beneficial. What were the goals for me? What were the expectations for me? What were the goals for the prison, the men who sang, the administration, and what were my expectations? And then I developed this course, Arts Behind Bars. And it was, again, this combination of mentoring students and putting theory in practice. The students get to choose the type of engagement they want. Some students, for reasons because they have experienced violent crimes, they are not suitable to go into a prison psychologically. It's not in their best interest. But there are other things that they can do. So students can either spend time going to the prison, or they can do indirect engagement. Maybe they're doing prison research for the prison administration. Maybe they're collecting books and CDs to bolster up the prison library, music library. So those sorts of indirect engagements are possibilities. Yeah. And then at the very end of the time of this, different intervals of this partnership, there are collaborative assessments. They assess my students and how well they've engaged with the men. The men assess the students. The men assess me and the program. I assess the overall program as well. And then we have a conversation about what that looks like. Are our needs that we agreed on the beginning, are they being met? And then you rework and you refine, and you can see a blossoming. The tough part, if you're developing humility, is sometimes the partnership doesn't work. And you have to determine together, this isn't working. And maybe this isn't the best structure for this community music engagement. And that's a tough conversation to have, but it's a necessary one, because you don't want to bring your frustrations to a community music engagement experience. So I just want to encapsulate this. This comes from Tania Mitchell. Tania Mitchell is an American who is works with this community-based learning pedagogy. You'll see at the top of this diagram, traditional service learning. Notice the reflection piece, constant reflection. What's working? What isn't working? What do I need to change? So you've got a community component, you've got a classroom component. Okay, that stays the same. But on the one, it's learning to serve and serving to learn. All of this is great, right? There's nothing wrong with this traditional service learning model. I rather like it. I especially like the critical service learning that Tania Mitchell espouses, such that from our time together, from our community sharing time, there is social change as a core value. All right, I'll be quite frank. In the United States, not everybody is really excited about prison reform. The notion is people should stay in prison, throw away the key, don't bother with them. They should not get any education. They shouldn't be singing. Who cares? I like to be subversive. For me, yes, I'm the choir director. How nice. But I also like to work from the inside out. I like to think, if you think about a wound, a really deep wound, often it heals from the inside out. So I started thinking about what happens if actually my work is situated such that the prison officers, the guards, the administration, the community surrounding the prison, what if they started to see the men, the singers, differently? Might their perceptions change? Might their attitudes change if they saw them doing something like singing? So I was very, perhaps, sneaky, maybe, I don't know, sneaky in inviting people into the rehearsal. There would be officers standing outside of our rehearsal room initially. And so I would invite them into the rehearsal room and say, hey, here's some music. Want to sing with us? Oh, no, we can't. So we can't read that. I said, oh, you can't read this? Oh, I bet one of the guys can help you with that. I'll bet one of the singers could help you with that. Oh, I can't do that. I said, oh, okay, well, just sit here. We welcome you into our community. Thank you for coming here. So eventually now we see the officers just kind of hanging outside of the room. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is something going on? Something I need to be aware of? No, we're just listening to the music. You're listening to the music. You're not there to guard. You're not there to do any of the other things that they used to be there for. And it was this moment of, I can't believe these guys can do this. I mean, we had a concert. One of the last concerts was September of 2019. And the wardens, the officers, the community members from the outside, Oberlin students, the singers, we were all kind of standing up and dancing together while we were all singing Lean on Me. I don't know if you know that song, but it was kind of a surreal moment, if I may say so myself. But I knew at that moment, this little inside thing is starting to shift. Again, I may need to start from scratch because COVID, I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know who survived COVID. I don't know if the same guards are still employed. There are lots of unknowns. So, but it's a working from the inside, from a social justice perspective. Can we allow the vulnerable voices to be heard? I just want to stop right there for a moment and ask you if you have any questions just on the theoretical stuff. I've talked too much.
There is a question in chat from Effie. Is art behind bars one semester long?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is a one semester long. And wow, it's a tough class because we have students. Oberlin is a very liberal, very social justice, social conscious group of students. And, they see me as being complicit. I am supporting mass incarceration in the United States. I am the devil incarnate because I go into prisons and I am giving free services. I'm volunteering, and the state is not otherwise willing to pay for these services. So, therefore, I am supporting the prison industrial system. And then I say, what if I told you I was an abolitionist and I wanted to do away with prisons? Now what do you do with that? And they still call me, a white, middle-aged, white, privileged woman. Okay, I am. So it's a tough group of students, but I appreciate that they're very critical and they're thinking critically about social issues surrounding singing. Sometimes I get so frustrated, they wear me out. They exhaust me. I see a question. Are you allowed any instruments? Evangelia, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Evangelia, is that correct? Evangelia, yes. We had a person in Oberlin wanted to donate a grand piano to the prison, and I said, I don't know. And the prison said, why not? And I thought, oh, I can think of lots of reasons why not, like piano strings that could be used to strangle people and, but hey, okay. So we had a piano donated, and the Conservatory of Music, they decided they had old instruments. And so instead of getting rid of the instruments, we have taken all the old violins, violas, cellos, and guitars, brought them to the prison. I thought they would need to be stored at the prison under lock and key, but no. The prison officials said, oh, Jody's program, sure, we can let the guys take them back into the cell blocks. So the guys can literally take the instruments back to their beds, back to their cells, and play and practice together. The warden called me into her office at one point before the pandemic and said, look out the window. What do you see? And I said, well, I see two guys sitting on the ground playing the violin. Well, they're two different gangs. one's from one gang and one's from another gang, and they usually are fighting. Look at them. They're practicing their parts together. I said, oh, darn. What a shame, right? She said, I don't know what you're doing here, but well, okay. I said, well, thank you so much for allowing us to bring our instruments here. The other thing the guys are doing is they're learning instrument repair so that they can repair their own instruments. Now, they're not allowed tools, so they'll use things like fingernail files and toe clippers as they are repairing the instruments. And, we bring strings in. I said, can we bring in like strings for the broken strings? And they're like, oh, yeah, no problem. So once the relationship is there, it's amazing how their open-mindedness also grows. So it's a mutual open-minded growth that happens. Sometimes, I mean, when I first came in there were plenty of days that I showed up and I was told, you're not having a rehearsal today. I said, but today's our day. Sorry, we decided you're not having rehearsal. Oh, is something going on? No. Oh, okay. Well, have a good weekend. Bye. So we leave. There were other times that I couldn't bring pencils into the prison because they had a sharp point. Now think about that. An end pin of a cello now that we're allowed to bring into the prison, and before I couldn't bring in sharpened pencils. So, the relationship is moving. I said I wanted to have a picnic in the prison, and the administration said no. I said, oh, come on, it's going to be ice cream and cookies, and we're going to celebrate whatever it was. I don't even know, it might have been the 4th of July, which was kind of comical. But finally they said, well, okay. I said, I promise I'll give you some ice cream and apple pie too. And so we had a picnic, and then we were asked, could we sing some Christmas carols? And I'm like, sure. Where do you want to sing Christmas carols? And they're like, okay, you have to stand outside of the cell blocks. You cannot go inside the buildings. Okay, so it's snowing and it's freezing rain and ice and whatever. We're standing outside, and next thing I knew, the prison guards were opening up the doors and saying, come on in. And so when we were finished, we were leaving, and they're like, oh, no, you're not done yet. Let's take you to another cell block and to another cell block. So they, and then we had a snowball fight and stuff like that. So again, the relationship is growing, the trust, the commitment to safety, the men's safety. But I'm also not a reckless person either, meaning that I play by the rules too. So I'm respectful of the rules. I don't agree with the rules, but are there other questions I think maybe popping up here?
Yes, there are
some. The prisoners that refuse to participate, absolutely, sure, with any choir. Some of them just wanted to try it out, and they realized, oh, you have to practice? Oh, I don't want to work. So they left. Okay, that's your prerogative. It would have happened if it would have been in my school choir too. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. What kind of songs do you especially sing? Yeah, people may not understand the language. Yeah, we sing in English. I bring them maybe 4 or 5 pieces of music, and I'll say, okay, here they are. Choose 2. Which ones are your favorites? And they don't read music, so we started by rote, but I always had sheet music in front of them. I always had the score in front of them. And I decided I was not going to be notation dependent. I mean, as a Kodai person, I wanted them desperately to be reading notation and things like that, but that wasn't a goal. That really was not I wanted them to sing, period. And so a lot was by rote. But eventually I had one guy say, hey, what are those black dots on this paper that you keep making us stare at? And I said, oh, why do you want to know? Well, we see lots of it. So what is it? I said, oh, you're curious about that? Well, let me share some of them. So once they said they wanted to know, then I could introduce notation and things like that, but I wasn't going to do it. We do a lot of oral skills. We do lots of Tao rhythmic movement, yoga stretches, things like that. So some of them say they read music. Not so sure, but they read more than they used to. Let's put it that way. Singing through freedom. Yeah. We're going to listen to a few excerpts going forth here in the presentation from the men. You'll hear some of the men talk about what being in this choir means to them. You might have read the chapter that I wrote. If not, no worries. But it's powerful to hear in their own voices their descriptions of the choir. And it's talk about humbling. It is very humbling to hear that they are engaged in freedom practice only 90 minutes of the week. Now that's problematic, right? Is it fair to have people experience total freedom, actually? They can say whatever they want. I may not agree with it. I may ask them to rephrase it and try again. To sing, to express for 90 minutes of a week, when I know that when they go back to their cell block, they don't have that same freedom. It's kind of like giving a child a half a piece of chocolate and then say, oh, you can't have the rest. Is that fair? And I've often thought about that from an ethical standpoint, from a psychological standpoint. Is that, and I've asked them, is this more harm than good? And they've relayed to me that it's not. But that is a question that I do have.
There's also a question about repertoire. What sort of repertoire do you use?
Sorry,
repertoire. What repertoire?
The repertoire. Thank you. Sorry. Repertoire. Anything from African American spirituals. We did a Renaissance motet. We did jazz. We did some standards. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swang. We did that doo-wop, 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 right? So we have an array. We have done some rounds. Every now and then, we do something that has a religious text. I do not want this to be a choir, a religious religious choir, a focus, a church choir, because we have people of all different faiths, and I want them, everybody included. And there are a lot of people, a lot of volunteers who come into the prison system to convert the people, to make them better. And that's not my job. My job is not a therapist. It is not a psychologist. It is not to make better. God knows I have enough of my own stuff to make better. I am there to facilitate music making, period. If it has ancillary effects, if it has secondary effects such that they feel free or they feel their voices heard, fantastic. But that's not my primary job. And I recognize that's my limitation. I am not a trained psychologist. Now, that being said, are there times that I hear things and I think, oh, what do I do with that? A man asked me, Ms. Jody, I can't sing today. My son was shot on the streets and is in the ER, and I can't be with him. And I know that I wasn't a good father because I was out in the streets and I was addicted, and guns were always in the house. He learned the behaviors from me. What do you do with that, right? I mean, guns, addiction, at least heroin addiction, that wasn't part of my farm girl background in Eastern Pennsylvania. My God. I had two parents and a house. I was never homeless. So initially when I started the choir, I thought, I can't do this. We have nothing in common. Until somebody said to me, Jody, don't be stupid. The music is what you have in common. It's your connector to your humanity. I was like, duh. Yeah, okay. All right, I can do this. Will you permit me to share with you some information about my OMAG choir? I would love to hear the sounds rather than my voice.
I would love to. Yes.
Thank you. Let me see here. I did it once. Could I do it again? Ay, ay, ay. Okay, so just a little background here. 1 out of the 5 prisoners in the entire world is in the US. Talk about pandemics, it's here. Incarceration is a pandemic in the United States. It is based on race, it is based on poverty, it is based on now immigrants trying to come into the United States and the recent ridiculous laws on immigration from our past president. Although I hate to call him a president. Anyway, so how many people are locked up? Well, you can see the number of state prisons. That's the arena where I work in, a volunteer in. I don't work. It's a state prison. But we also have local jails. Local jails are thought to be those places where people await their trials. You can await in a jail for 2 to 3 years without ever going to trial. Meanwhile, you're incarcerated. There are federal prisons as well, but notice the number of youth who are incarcerated. Immigrant detention, those numbers are going higher. Most of them are children. So it is a huge problem in the United States. Did I know any of this prior to going into a prison? No. I needed to learn quickly about the culture, about what I was entering. Here's a recording, a little bit snippet of my OMEG choir. That was our first year. Now remember, again, they're not singing from notation. And to Effie's point, we're not going to Carnegie Hall anytime soon with our recording, and I don't care. One of the benefits of doing this choir is that this has reminded me of why I became a musician. I love to sing. Being at a conservatory, being an academic, you get bogged down into the model, the notion of perfection, and you can lose sight easily about what's the importance. Why do I value music? And the men have reminded me why I love music. My conducting, before meeting you in this webinar, I had a conducting class and I was almost laughing because, I had the official baton and I was teaching them technique and all that. None of that matters. I don't conduct the prison choir like I would, a formal traditional school choir. And maybe I should. How different could my choirs be if I would incorporate some of the things that I do with my prison choir? And I'm still experimenting with that, by the way. Here are some more of the guys, and I'd like to hear their own voices describe OMEG. So knowing the county, here is our county. Grafton is about right here where the prison is. Lorain County is predominantly white. It has a lower median income than nationally. The median age is slightly older than the American national population, and it is highly conservative. So here you have Oberlin College, highly liberal in a overall generally conservative county. There is the conservative view on prison. When I try to talk to people about what I do, it is, these people deserve nothing. And so it's a very hard sell to sell this program on a larger level outside of Oberlin. So how did I create this choir? I was contacted, like I said, about beginning a choir. I visited the prison. I wanted to meet the administration and the residents. I wanted to see what their needs were. I wanted us to enter dialogue. I held an information session at the prison for interested residents, a recruitment sort of thing. And then our first rehearsal was in 2015. In 2017, the OMAG choir stopped because I did not realize, nobody told me, that they were depopulating the prison. That meant that they were taking the prisoners away and taking them to other prisons inside the state. They were changing the state prison into a drug rehabilitation prison. Therefore, they took away the members of my choir, and I didn't know about it until I showed up and nobody was there. So I said, oh, this partnership isn't working. Sorry, I need to leave. Thank you very much for the time we spent together, and that's it. So by January of the next year, so that would have been 2018, the prison administration said, well, what would it take for you to come back and start a choir? And I said, well, I need singers. I mean, you took away my singers. What do you mean? What do I need? I need singers. And so they said, okay, what if you went to the medium security prison? Could you start a choir there? And I said, I don't know. You know, our relationship didn't work out the last time. The communication wasn't all that great. I don't know. And so I knew in my heart, of course, I would start a choir there. And so we did. And that's where we have been. We've been doing Zoom rehearsals, and you know how the Zoom works with music, and there's this time delay. But you know what? It's not about coordination. It was about having people sing during the time of pandemic. So I was meeting with groups, masked groups of 8, 9 people every Friday for an hour and 15 minutes. And we did listening lessons. We talked about pandemic things, and the prison systems were really hit hard. They didn't have the sort of controls of COVID that the rest of us in our societies might have had. I also suspect that they're going to be the last citizens of the US to be inoculated, to be vaccinated. So together we created this mission statement. What were our goals? OMAG provides an opportunity for residents to engage in community building, cooperative group learning, discipline, self-esteem, and self-expression through music. Again, we created that together. I would like to hear some other voices about OMAG. Notice who's at the piano. There is a resident, a person who's incarcerated at the keyboard. My accompanist has been serving a prison sentence now for 28 years, 28 and a half years. He is a composer, has a master's degree in music theory and composition, and a piano performance degree, undergraduate degree. And so this is a highly qualified musician and is absolutely my right hand in terms of rehearsing a choir and keeping the choir going. This is how our rehearsals looked as we were Christmas caroling this year. What I did is I recorded on Zoom. It kind of looks like the moon landing in the quality of the video, but I recorded different pods of the men's singing Christmas carols. And then I put together a video. I sang some Christmas carols. My husband and I did clarinet and piano duets, sorts of things. And then I dropped the DVD off at the prison because, of course, they weren't having any family visitations, and they had nothing prepared for the Christmas holidays. And so I wanted at least them to see themselves, to hear music, and to be together. So yeah. Smarl, how much time do I have? I don't want to overstay my welcome here.
No, I told you you can never overstay your welcome. You have all the time that you need. we are very happy to hear what you have prepared. So don't worry.
Oh, thank you. You're lovely. So that I said to you that I take students into the choir, and here's some of their reaction to being a part of the choir. So that's a disposition shift. Instead of thinking that we're going into the prison to give them the opportunity or to give them develop their creativity, instead it's let's give them an experience that helps them express the creativity they already have. They don't need me to be giving them anything. They're already musical. They're already creative. They're already artistic. So that's a dispositional thinking shift that we have been exploring. You can see the little black dots. This was early on. We use solfege. We do sight singing. And some of them grouse about it. And I say, look, you sang before you learned notation. So if you don't like it, don't do it. I mean, it's up to you. It's a free world. Just know that I'm not stopping in terms of part singing. We may be singing 2 and 3 parts now. We're moving on. And when we get to a motet, you may need to know how to read the music, or at least some parts of the music. So your choice, though, up to you. So let's see what we have here. So I would invite you, if you are at all interested in reading about struggles, challenges, successes, those moments where I thought I'm going to come unglued, those moments when my husband needed to be waiting with open arms because I was about to fall to pieces because of my work with the prison choir, those moments when I was flying high and ecstatic. I've sung Beethoven with the Pittsburgh Symphony, Beethoven 9, and I tell you there are and other things, solo recitals, and those moments are comparable to some of the moments that we've had and we've shared in this community music setting. Anyway, you want to read more about it? There's the blog. I'm happy to again share that with Smaragda. I just wanted to stop there. Would it be helpful to you to have the memo of understanding that I created with the Prism that showed the proposal of when I first, when I was reestablishing the choir? It was the proposal that I used. It was, here are my expectations. Here are my expectations for you. So it pretty much laid out everybody's expectations in a contract. I signed, the prison warden signed. I would encourage you, if you're doing community music stuff, to in especially with vulnerable populations like this, you're working within another institution. Would that be at all helpful to you in seeing? Maybe I'll just put it in the chat. If you want it, you want it. If not, don't worry about it. Let me see if I can do this. File, my computer. Smaro has her own file on my computer desktop. That's
only one file? I'm surprised.
Don't get greedy. Don't get greedy. Here it comes, everybody. I'm also going to send you a list of resources, things you might want to read if you want. You read or you might have seen as a part of Lee Higgins and Willingham's references. Here we go. That chapter, you might have seen the name Mary Cohen in terms of prison choirs. She's written lots, and she really is the mother of prison research. I'm a baby compared to the stuff that she's done. So if that's of all interest to you, I would recommend her work as well. So what questions do you have? I've talked at you way long and shared. You've been very indulgent of me and my work. What question might you have about the prison choir or anything?